pass the word to Jamie, who is now going to talk to us about anxiety in early childhood. Thank you, Jamie, so much for being here and for taking your time while being out sick, I have to say, and giving us this presentation. It means a lot.
Thank you so much, Bea. Thank you to everyone for joining as well. So today's a follow-up session of the discussion that we had in, I think it was June, about understanding and navigating anxiety in young children. So if you didn't watch the first one, then you have the link. But today we're going to dive a little bit deeper, specifically into the strategies, practical strategies that we can use when supporting children with anxiety. So when we talk about strategies, generally what we are referring to is some form of action, some form of plan. Essentially something, the question is what can I do to support this child, or what can the child do to manage their anxiety? And this can be a very difficult question to answer, but there are two parts to keep in mind when it comes to selecting effective strategies. It's not just about the action, but it is also about the goal. There has to be a goal or a specific outcome that you have in mind. So I'd like for each of you, so if you have a piece of paper with you, or if you want to do it on your laptop or iPad or whatever it is that you have with you, just take a moment to think about what is, because it can be quite a broad statement to say, what can I do to support a child with anxiety? Support can consist of a lot of things. So for you, within your context, within your circumstances, the children that that you work with, or even with your own children, what does support look like to you? What is your goal? So it might be helpful to try and complete these sentences. What can I do to what? Or what can the child do to what? You're welcome to change the wording as well, if you want to, but try to make sure that you are as specific as possible. I mean, I have this question, I hear this question asked very often, what can I do? But it's phrased in so many different ways. It can be like, what can I do to help the child calm down? What can I do to help the child never feel anxious again? What can I do to, or how should I react if the child is screaming? What can I do to stop them from feeling this way? So there's a lot of different ways that we can phrase this question. The similarity is that we're all looking for a strategy. We all want to know what to do, but different outcomes. So just take a moment just to think for yourself, what would that look like for you? If you would like to share in the chat what your goal is, then you're welcome to, or if anyone would like to, I mean, it's a small enough group that we won't have to go into separate rooms or separate groups to talk. So if anyone would like to share with us as well, just raise your hand, and then I'll give you a minute just to think as well. Okay. Does anyone want to?
Yes, me.
Because I'd love to hear from you as well, in your own contexts. So I can't see on the side. Oh, okay.
Can you hear me, Jamie?
Yes, no, I can. Yeah, there was a glitch for a second.
So what I had was my first thought was, how can I help a child, or what can I do when a child is hurting others, and how can I help that child to stop hurting others or him herself?
Okay. Yeah, because that can be a symptom of anxiety. That can be the way that the anxiety is manifesting. Children might lash out in situations like that. So that's really helpful to have that specific idea, because very often we will say, but these strategies are not working. And it's very easy to feel that way, that they're not working, if we don't know exactly what it is that we're trying to achieve with that. Does anyone else want to share? So in your specific context, your specific situation, what is the goal? What would you like to achieve by implementing a strategy? You can just raise your hand or put the hand sign up.
I can share.
Okay.
So I have a specific child in mind in the nursery that I'm thinking what I can do to support her. She has a fear of certain characters, based on our book-based literacy. So how would I manage that? But she doesn't really demonstrate the fear at school, but then I get feedback from parents with behavior and nightmares and things at home. So how to manage that?
Okay. Yeah, that's also a really specific. It's a specific situation. How do you think you might phrase the question in terms of what can I do to support her, but to make that a little bit more specific? And is it that you would want her to be able to no longer be afraid of these characters, or what do you think that might be?
Yeah, what can I do to make her feel safe, I suppose, and like happy with our learning?
Okay, to feel safe so that she can benefit from learning, so that you can read these stories to the group and show them the characters without her going home and feeling scared. That's actually really common, that children will keep it together at school, and then when they get home, everything just lets loose. And that's almost like a freeze response in anxiety. And sometimes it can be difficult to implement strategies with those children because they're not showing their feelings at school. And that's why working with parents is so important, hearing feedback from them, and then also giving them tools and strategies that they can use at home, making sure that we always work together, and we always have that triangle going with teacher, parent, and child, working all together. Okay. Anyone else who wants to share before we move on? As long as you've got your own particular goals in mind, that's the main thing. So often as well, what I will hear is, the strategy is not working. And an example of a situation where I often hear this is where a child might be crying and then a parent or a teacher will say, but it's not working. Look, he's crying. Why is it not working? But the goal was, for this child to regulate. He's crying, he's regulating, it's working. So it's very important to have a clear idea in your mind of what exactly is it that you want, and what does that look like? How are you going to measure if that goal is achieved? So the next thing that I'd like you to do is think about strategies that you are currently using. If you're not currently using any strategies, then maybe think about strategies that you've seen colleagues use, or any other strategies that you've come across. But particularly if you are using strategies at the moment, think about those, and then rate how effective do you think they are in achieving the goal that you just wrote down. So you could also just add it to the chat, or if you'd like to share as well, or you can just write it down for yourself. Or if you're feeling creative, you can react with a little emoji that could give us an idea. How do you feel about how effective these strategies are in achieving the goal that you just wrote down? I'll give you a minute for that as well. How do I make an emoji? Are you able to do the reacting? Because I don't know, I'm not seeing it on my
In the
screen for some
chat,
reason.
I put my emoji in the chat.
Ah, okay. Okay, because normally there's the little react thing, but I don't know. It's
Yeah,
not.
the reactions down. Oh yeah. So
Yeah,
if
my technology is not technologying today, so
it's having a Monday.
yeah, definitely.
But the emoji that I put in the chat is not in the reaction. So
Okay. Well, either way that you want to do it. So yeah, it's very easy to feel like the strategies are not effective, but again, just to reframe our thinking of what would it actually look like, to become very clear about that. If this goal were to be achieved, or what would that look like, and how would I know if that is if it has been effective or not. And the reason that we often feel like strategies are not effective, it's important to keep in mind that anxiety is an emotion, and emotions are apparently one of the most complex things in the entire world. The world's top researchers cannot agree on a definition of what emotions are. They are just these complex states of mind or physical states. And the one thing that the researchers do agree on are that there are different aspects of an emotion. So there are the internal aspects. It's this constant interplay of internal and external events. So there's thoughts, memories, beliefs, cognition, all of those things that are happening in your mind. There's the physiology of it, the heart rate increasing, the breathing, muscle tension, all of the other things that go with that. And then there are the external aspects as well. So there might be an event that can trigger a thought, which can lead to an emotion or an experience, some kind of stimulus. So within the environment, there might be, like the characters that the child is scared of. There might be something that they see. And then that can lead to behavior, like hurting or hitting. What can I do to stop a child from hurting or hitting? But we want to try to simplify this as much as possible. So one of my favorite researchers is Dr. Mark Brackett, and I really love his way of describing emotions. He describes them as an information system. And it makes a lot of sense because, if we look at the whole physiology of what science talks about in terms of emotions, our body has a whole bunch of different systems already. You've got your digestive system, your respiratory system, cardiovascular system, all of that. So we can just simplify it. We can just refer to emotions as an information system. Our body is trying to tell us something. It's almost like it's sending us a message about what's happening to us internally, what's happening externally, and then it's giving us information so that we can make a choice of how we want to react. But for younger children, that can be really, really difficult. And then that can make it difficult for us as well to determine what to do to support them and to help them in these moments. Another way that Dr. Brackett refers to emotions is as like a river constantly flowing. There is never a moment that we are not feeling something. We're always feeling something. Numb is also a feeling. So even if you're feeling numb, you're still feeling something. So it's important to keep that in mind as well, that we can't stop a child from feeling a certain way. We can't control the emotions of others. There might be things that we can do to redirect the flow of the river, to support them with that, but we can't stop that is constantly flowing. And another way that I like to, this is not from Dr. Brackett, this is my own one. Another way that I like to refer to emotions is like a visitor. And this can be really helpful as a strategy when we're talking to children about their anxiety. It's really important to involve them in the process of understanding what they're feeling as well. And they need to know that emotions are not permanent. You know, we're always feeling something, but that particular emotion that is visiting in that moment is not going to be there forever. Maybe you'll feel that way again tomorrow or later, but it's going to be there now maybe for a few minutes, and then it will go away and another emotion will have a turn. And if we don't deal with these visitors, then they keep on coming back. And I mean, this always makes me think of, you know, when I was a child, I had a neighbor that lived across the street from me. He was a couple of years younger than me. And every day after school, he would come to my house and knock on the door, and he would want me to come play outside. And there were just some days that I just didn't feel like him, but he kept on coming back every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes, just knocking on the door. And my dad would say to me, just go play with him. He's not going to stop coming back until you go out and play with him. And I'll tell my dad, but I don't feel like it right now. And there were days that I really did feel like playing with him. We were actually really good friends. But on days that I didn't feel like it, I just couldn't bring myself to open the door. But I mean, he knew I was home, clearly, otherwise that's why he kept on coming back. So with emotions like anxiety, it's exactly the same concept. We have to deal with it at some stage. And that's why we sometimes get these children who will seem fine the whole day, but then later when they go home, it all comes out, because that visitor is going to keep on knocking on the door until the door gets opened, until there is some kind of outlet. So we need to give the children an opportunity to let the feeling visit and do its job. And Dr. Brackett also talks a lot about, in terms of strategies, how we can teach children to use their emotions in a helpful way. You know, he says that emotions can either hurt us or help us. And we need to teach the children that there is a biological purpose, that there is a reason that this feeling is coming to visit them. It's bringing information. It's coming to tell you something. And you can choose what you want to do with that information. But for very young children, that can be difficult, because their brains, you know, their prefrontal cortexes are still developing. So very often they go straight into anxiety mode, because they as the stimulus is going in through the senses, it's bypassing, you know, the prefrontal cortex completely. You know, it's going to the amygdala, and then it's just from there, it's immediately going into a stress response or an anxiety response, because they don't always have the ability to reflect on that yet. Just defining anxiety again, just very important to keep in mind when we are choosing strategies that, and this is again Dr. Brackett's definitions from his app called How We Feel. So anxious is when we feel worried or uneasy, you know, about a certain outcome, a certain future event. And then if we look at definitions of worried and uneasy, we would be worried about, you know, actual or potential problems. And for younger children who have imaginations, they can't differentiate between fantasy and reality yet. Like maybe the child who's scared of those characters, maybe for that child, you know, those characters are real, or it's not something that can really be separated, you know, the fantasy and the reality. So whether it's an actual problem or a potential problem, the way that we as adults would see that would be quite different to how a child would see that. So that can also really direct our choices of what we decide to do in order to support them. So to simplify that again, we could think of anxiety as a specific type of worry. A type of worry that is based largely on uncertainty, particularly around future outcomes. So it's that what if feeling. So you might have to think of strategies for a child who has separation anxiety. You know, they cry in the morning when they come to school, you know, 3 months into the school year, and they still don't want to say goodbye to their parents in the morning. They're still clinging onto them. Or it might be a child with social anxiety, where they worry about being judged by others. And those are the children who would, you know, they might come to you and ask for a lot of reassurance. Is my drawing good? You know, they might want you to, and this is also kind of a strategy in itself, you know, they might want you to draw the picture for them or say that they can't do it. And that sometimes would be something that we would want to do in order to comfort them. But that's also not always the most helpful way, because we're not really teaching them resilience in those moments. They don't have the opportunity to actually practice just tolerating this feeling of discomfort. So again, just to keep in mind when you're choosing your strategy, this is what we are dealing with. We are dealing with a child who is feeling a specific type of worry, and that worry is based on uncertainty. There's a potential future outcome. They're thinking, what if mommy doesn't come back after she drops me off? What if somebody laughs at me? What if I can't draw the picture as nicely as my friend? You know, whatever those worries are, the child themselves might not even be aware of it. But when we are supporting them with this, we can just keep in mind, like, what type of anxiety could this be? And then that can also help us to go in the direction of what is the most suitable strategy to support them here. You would have noticed that all of these are red, these feelings, and that's because on the mood meter, is anyone familiar with the mood meter besides Bea? Anyone else? So the mood meter is a chart, and it's also a strategy that I'm definitely going to recommend. If you do not have these up in your classrooms, there are many different versions available, child-friendly versions where they have pictures instead of the words. It's something that was created by Dr. Mark Brackett and his team of researchers. And you can see anxiety is over here in the red section. It's a red feeling. The red emotions are the high energy, unpleasant emotions. So this is divided into different quadrants. The ones at the top are the higher energy emotions. So it could be energy in your body or in your mind. And then the lower bottom two are the low energy emotions. And then on the right, we've got the pleasant emotions, and on the left, the unpleasant emotions. Unpleasant does not mean bad. All emotions can be useful and helpful. It just depends on, again, what we choose to do with them in those moments. So anxious, if you look at where anxious is not all the way up at the top. I mean, anxious is, on the left, it's like number 4 on the left. So it can be quite an unpleasant feeling, but it's not such a high energy feeling. It's not at the point where the child is panicked just yet. So when we're thinking of strategies for supporting children with anxiety, we're not thinking about children with anxiety disorders. I mean, that is something that you would need additional support with. You would need maybe external support from a psychologist, or that there would need to be some other kind of input. When the strategies that we're talking about today are for children who are experiencing typical anxiety, which is a normal feeling that we welcome, because it's helpful and it's needed in a lot of situations, or children who maybe experience anxiety a bit more often than their peers, but it's not at the level where it's a disorder just yet. And we're also talking about anxiety specifically. So if the child is already at the point where they are freaking out, hitting other kids or screaming or whatever it is, they're probably not anxious anymore. It's probably gone up to the point where they are panicked, or there's a different emotion there. And then that would also direct your strategy. So determining how is it that this child is feeling, being able to recognize that, teaching them to identify how they are feeling as well, depending on their age. And then that will also guide you in what you choose to do when helping them to regulate. So I often find that in classrooms and in home situations, the strategies that I come across often fall into one of these categories. So you can think of prevention as anything that you would do before in order to prevent the child from feeling anxious. So you might, for example, if the child is scared of characters in a book, you might decide we're not reading this book today. Or if they are scared of a particular area of the classroom or something like that, then you would keep them away from that, or sitting them in a particular area, anything that you are doing to try to prevent them from feeling anxious. And then short-term strategies would be more kind of during. So this is when you can see that the child is feeling anxious. So this is anything that you would do in that moment. So try now already to start thinking of what are some things that you are already doing in the moment when you can see that the child is feeling anxious. And then long-term strategies you can think of as your after. Because I find that really often we tend to put long-term strategies in place only after something has happened. And that makes a lot of sense as well, because we need to get to know, each year we have a new group of children, and we need to get to know them and what are their triggers, what are their needs. So long-term strategies I often find are things that we only put in place after we get to know, what are these triggers. And then instead of preventing, we put things in place that can actually teach the children skills to manage their anxiety. So it could be anything that you have in your classroom. If you've got posters up on the wall, like a mood meter, if you've got sensory toys, any kind of strategy that you are doing long-term to support all the kids. So think about each of those, and then take a couple of minutes to think about as many anxiety strategies that you are already familiar with. So it can be for children or for adults. Strategies, you might want to divide them into strategies that you are using in your classroom, or strategies that you use for yourself or for your own children at home, or a separate list of strategies that you don't use, but you've just heard about them. So I'll give you a minute just to do that, make a list, and then think about as many as possible. One minute, I'll let you know when time's up. Okay. Does everyone have a list or some form of a list? Does anyone want to share some examples?
And Can you hear me, Jamie?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. What I wrote, maybe they're not the best strategies, or I don't know, maybe they're not even right for anxiety, but what I usually try and use is, for example, some hiding spots or some calm spaces. Sometimes like physical, like a hug. For example, some children do need that or want it. Fidget toys or fidget tools. Some children also like to take bathroom breaks. So I ask them, like, it's like a hiding space for them where they can be for themselves. So I give them a bathroom break. Or I also wrote a drawing book. Like some kids, like they can draw their emotions, and that helps them to deal with that anxiety in the moment.
Okay. Yeah, those are all really, really great, really, really helpful strategies. Did anyone else have anything similar? Anything different? Sure.
We have calm corners in the classrooms, and then we have like a sensory space in my room in here as well that they could come to. We call it the rainbow room, and children use like a rainbow room pass card to show to their teacher to say they need to come here for a break. And we have the lights on, and we have like a breathing cat and a breathing dog. It's like a little puppy, but they think it's real, but they like coming here to just stroke it and take care of it. And we do the breathing strategy. So some teachers do the breathing in and out as their finger goes up and down, and some teachers use there's like this expanding ball where they breathe in as the ball goes up and then out to kind of show how fast and how slow to breathe, so they can do it at the same time as us. But yeah, most of our children tend to go with the breathing strategy when they're feeling a bit anxious or worried.
Okay. Okay, wow, it sounds like you've got quite a lot in place already. And do you find that those are used in moments where the children are already anxious, or is it used just, throughout the day as a preventative measure, or at what points they
Yeah,
use?
most of our children tend to follow the strategies. So we use the zones of regulation, so they know what each color means, and they can come and tell us, oh, I'm in the blue zone now, and we have a chat about it. And then it's usually because they've had an argument with a friend over a toy or something. Children that are feeling a little bit distressed because of separation anxiety in the morning, or something has happened on their way to school or something. Some of them are able to go to their teacher and say, I need to go to the rainbow room. I need some time away from the classroom or something. So it's a range of strategies. But yeah, with this child with the characters, she tends to come in here quite a lot. And sometimes I'm not sure if it's just like escaping from something else that's happening in the classroom, because it's not like those story time sessions that she's afraid of. Those characters is not something constantly happening in the classroom, but she does want to keep coming in here. Or I don't know if it's like her escaping her feelings or something. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure her out.
Yeah, like an avoidance. But I mean, that can also give or provide a lot of information, how often she's going to this room in the day and what parts of the day, to see if there's some kind of pattern. And then, I mean, that in itself is a strategy, having a room like that. And it's there for her to use if she needs to. But it's important also just to pick up on the pattern of when is she using it in a helpful way, and when is she using it as just an avoidance, or a way to escape from it. That's really interesting though. I love that, the idea of having a whole room, dedicated just to that. So on your list of strategies that you wrote down, try to think which category each of these strategies fits into. So you could just mark it off, just put like a P or a S or a L or whatever it is next to each one. Okay. And then after you've done that, which category appears on your list most often? You could put it into the chats. I don't know, for some reason I can't see the chats. Don't know. While you do that, I'm going to try to get the chat open because.
I can read you the chat if you want to.
Oh no, wait, no,
Jane.
it's fine. Yeah, no, I've got it to work. Okay. So if you'd like to share in the chat as well, which category on your list appears the most often? And out of those categories, is it the strategies that you are already using, strategies that you're not using, and the ones that you are, the strategies that you are currently using, which category did those fit into? Are you using mostly preventative? Because that can also provide a lot of information and deeper understanding into, you know, if you're feeling like your strategies are effective or not effective, this can help guide, you know, why is that? Okay, short-term and long-term. Okay, it's interesting to see this. So is there no one who had more of preventative in place? So strategies where you're just trying to prevent anxiety altogether. Okay, it seems like with most it was short-term and long-term. Okay.
The thing is, I feel, for example, that usually we tend to respond to the kids rather than prevent. Like, it's so much easier to respond to their anxiety rather than prevent it, especially like if you're in a classroom or in a setting where there is so many children and you don't have the individual focus on every single one of them. And so that's why, yeah, it's just more normal to react than to prevent.
Yeah, and when there's a lot of children as well, it can be difficult to prevent kind of individual incidents from happening. And sometimes we only know it's there when it's happening, when it's visible. Okay, that would make sense then why there's the more short-term, the more responsive strategies. Okay, so to keep in mind is the, you know, when it comes to strategy goals and prevention, so I'm just going to skip ahead for a second. This idea of prevention, it would be really helpful to change the wording around that. So instead of using prevention, it might be helpful to think more of preparation, because it's not always possible to plan, especially for an emotion like anxiety that is linked to uncertainty. Sometimes it can be completely unpredictable when a child might feel that way. So instead of prevention, it's better to have preparation. So having a space like a rainbow room or a calm space, or to have sensory toys or any resources that might be helpful, to rather just to be prepared. But just with the goals in mind, we are not trying to eliminate all anxiety. So, I mean, instead of giving you a whole list of different strategies that you can use, and in a moment I will give some examples, but instead of just giving a whole list, there is so much information out there. There are so many resources online. I think most of us have heard of, you know, breathing strategies, you know, mindfulness techniques, and all of those. It's more important to think of when and how are you going to use these strategies, and especially what is the goal. So the goal should not be to eliminate all anxiety. We need anxiety. It's a really, really helpful emotion. It's the emotion that, you know, causes us to, you know, get up in the morning, to make sure that our alarms are set at night. You know, if there's a potential dangerous situation, like you broke a glass in the kitchen, you're not going to walk into the kitchen without shoes on because you might cut your foot. So it's a really helpful emotion. And for children as well, it can be a really, really helpful emotion. If they are going into a new school or a new classroom, or they have a new teacher, it's completely understandable, and it's very important for them to have a little bit of anxiety, because if they just run into any situation without thinking at all, that can have a potentially dangerous outcome. We don't want to eliminate all anxiety, and we don't want to stop the anxiety completely from happening. So also this idea of getting children to calm down immediately, I mean, it's really convenient, you know, for us if they calm down immediately, and for the rest of the class often, but it's not helpful for them in the long term. And it might also teach them to suppress emotions. So when they calm down immediately, we're pretty much stopping that river. We're stopping that process from happening. So when a child is feeling anxious and all of those physiological reactions start happening, that's not something that you can stop. It's an automatic process. It's something that the body is doing naturally. So, you know, sympathetic nervous system's kicking in, you know, heart rate's going up. So all we can really do in that moment is just be present, be with them, let them have resources that they find helpful. And for every child, it might be completely different. Some children love the squeezy toys, some children hate them, some children use them as weapons on each other. So it really depends on the child. There is no one particular formula for how we can help a child to regulate. I'm working on one, by the way. Apparently you can't quantify emotions, but I'm going to challenge that. But there is no one set formula. It's just about getting to know the children in your group, figuring them out, what their needs are, and just keeping in mind we cannot stop this process. It's a physiological process. It's not something that the child can control. So often we just have to let them ride it out, let them ride the wave, be present with them in that moment, and acknowledge how they are feeling. Try not to use too much language. And in moments, if you can see that the anxiety is, you know, going up, if it's starting to become something more like panic or, you know, terrified, then try to use as little language as possible. Try not to ask questions like, oh, why do you feel this way? What's wrong? Or there's nothing to worry about. It can be really invalidating to tell a child there's nothing to worry about. We as adults know in that moment that there's nothing to worry about. We know that they're safe, but they don't feel that way. And they need to be able to trust that when they feel anxious about something and they identify that, they need to trust that when they come to us, they are going to be shown empathy and acceptance. So creating an environment where emotions are seen as normalized. Very often children will feel like they are different, or I mean, when they get a little bit older, I mean, normally in the early years, when they're still in kindergarten, it's not as common for them to think about these things. But when they start getting older into primary, they start to think, you know, I'm weird. You know, what's wrong with me? Am I the only one that feels this way? Because very often they've been reacted to in the past by an adult saying to them, just, why are you feeling this way? There's nothing to be worried about. Just stop. Just, you know, be happy, be fine. So try to, and it's very difficult because immediately all we want to do is comfort them. It's really challenging for us to see them struggle, but we want to give them the confidence that they can manage this emotion. We can't say to them as well, you know, everything's going to be okay. We don't know that. I mean, most of the time it will be, but that's also not very helpful to them in that moment. So just being very aware of the language that you use when speaking to them, the right time to speak to them. You know, if it's a moment, just try to think like, where on the mood meter are they? If it's a very high energy emotion, then maybe now is not the best time to speak. But if you see that the physiological symptoms seem to be kind of reducing, going away, then you can gauge and see if that it would be a more helpful time to reflect and to talk about it with them and normalize it for them. It can be really helpful depending on the age of the child, but even very young children, you can explain to them, this is a feeling. It's something that happens in our brains and in our bodies, teaching them how to recognize that. And when these situations come up that cause them to feel anxious, and just normalize it, like, oh, okay, oh, it's your worried feeling visiting again. Okay, that's okay. And then offer them something that they might find helpful, but make sure that it is normalized. It is a completely normal part of your daily program, of your routine. We don't want children to be reliant on external help as well, so we want to support them, but we need to make sure that we keep a balance between them having that autonomy to be able to identify when they're feeling anxious and to identify when they can manage it themselves and when they need to ask for support, because we do want them to come and ask for support if they need it, but we don't want them to become overly reliant on it. And especially to avoid teaching avoidance. The most helpful strategy in terms of supporting a child with anxiety would be to teach them how to tolerate discomfort. I think that's something a lot of us never learned as children. The first thing that we want to do when we feel any form of discomfort is the quickest way to make it disappear. So we need to teach them how to tolerate that discomfort, how to tolerate that uncertainty. Uncertainty is never going to go away. There are going to be situations for the rest of their lives where they don't know what the outcome is going to be. And if we give in too often by letting them avoid, then we teach them that that is the only way to do it. And when children are scared of something or anxious about something, I mean, naturally, that's what they're going to do. They're going to avoid. They're going to try run away or be away from whatever it is that is making them feel anxious. And like, when I say that we need to be teaching them tolerance, I'm not saying that we need to throw them into the deep end and put them in situations that are going to terrify them, but just gradually, over time, expose them to new things within a safe environment as they feel comfortable to do it. But if they, if they're feeling comfortable in one place for too long, the same with learning, like academic learning as well. If they're already, they've mastered that skill, then it's time to move on. It's time to start feeling uncomfortable again. So just gradually with time, exposing them to things.
Jamie, I just want to make you aware that we have less than 3 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, so that we can wrap up and say goodbye to everyone.
Okay. Oh, good.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's just the main thing I wanted to emphasize as well. So just making sure that whatever strategy it is that you choose, that you are emphasizing acceptance, that you are creating an environment where emotions are normalized, valued, accepted, that you are a safe space for the child, that they feel that they can come to you. And also that you are providing resources that are in reach of them. There's been many times I've gone into a classroom and the resources are up on like a top shelf somewhere and the kids can't get to them. So make sure that they can independently also go and choose those resources. I love the idea of having something like a rainbow room as well, but then also just monitoring how often are they using it. It's absolutely fine for them to go and use it. It's amazing that that is there for them. But if they're using it too often, to the point that they are not going to start to build up that tolerance slowly, then maybe offer something else, just gradual exposure as much as possible. Yeah, so as I said, I'm not going to share just a list of, do deep breathing, use sensory toys, there are many resources available online. There are many systems. There's zones of regulation. There's the mood meter. There's emotional elements. There's there are endless resources available online, but these are the most important things to keep in mind when you are selecting your strategies, just to make sure that you are a safe space for the child and that you're not enabling them to become avoidant, that gradually over time you are exposing them to new experiences in a way that they feel comfortable. If it's a child that's recently had a traumatic experience or something like that, that's not really a situation where you would want to expose them to things that they're anxious about, but in a typical situation, just gradually over time. Okay, does anyone have questions before we say goodbye, or any specific situations or examples? Or any thoughts? No one, yeah. It must be a Monday.
It is a Monday. Although I do have to say that, like the welcoming the feeling and letting them normalize it for them, it's definitely something that I should start working on myself, because I feel that sometimes I want to try and fix those feelings for the kids, and then I don't give them the space to navigate through them and to understand that yes, it's something normal, and it comes and it goes. So perhaps that is my takeaway from this webinar and this session that I'm gonna really try and work on.
Yeah, which can be challenging because of course we want them to feel better immediately, but just giving them that space so that they have evidence like, oh wow, I actually got through it. It's like I can actually do this. It didn't last forever.
Right.
And that it will end. It's just a visitor.
Definitely.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Jamie, for this session. Again, Jamie's been out sick, and she's out sick, and she's still delivering this opportunity for all of us to learn. We will send the recording out as well for those ones that missed it. We'll try to prompt some more conversations on LinkedIn, so just keep an eye to that, and perhaps share some of more if you have any other questions or any resources that you would like to share with the rest of the community. That is the place where you can do it. I see that Taylor has been writing in the chat. It's important to remember that we ourselves also need to work on our own patients, definitely, with supporting students through those moments. They are little people too, and need to have the space and the support to get through it. Yes, Taylor. And actually, Taylor is going to be our next presenter. She's going to talk to us about neurodiversity in early years in January, which is going to be a great follow-up conversation from this session. So very much looking forward to that. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here on a Monday, as Jamie said, for joining this session. And we're looking forward to connecting with you in the future opportunities. I hope that the rest of your week goes well and it's smooth. And you guys are all getting ready at school for the winter celebrations.